Want to welcome everyone to this session, which is being entitled Script, Schedule, and Speak. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow. I am with the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion, and that is in Berkeley, California. I'm also the senior pastor at the Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit. And I would like to share a little bit of what I have gained when I've started to work with elected officials. I was asked to begin this work about 2 years ago, and I knew nothing about it and was very concerned if I even had the chops or the skills in order to do this. But I found that really it was something simple because I, as a religious leader, am comfortable and confident speaking with people in the public already. And it was just a matter of simply reorienting my skills. And so that is what I would like to do with you here today, is to help you reorient your skills so that you, as a faith leader or someone who represents a faith community, can just simply help turn the tide, especially with the things that are happening within our world, within our nation, within our very own communities. That you indeed have the power to impact and affect change where you live. And so that is what this session is going to be about. So I have three objectives I would like to share with you. The first is to provide the rationales for speaking to your elected officials on the issues that matter the most to you. Now, granted, we may have some moderate folks on here. I would be surprised if we have anyone on the conservative political end. But nonetheless, I'm going to be speaking to you about how to talk about progressive issues that matter to you the most. Next, we're going to review the steps, and I have 12 of them, 12 steps, to help you script your message, schedule your message with your representative, and how to craft your meeting so you can be persuasive, even with those who are not with you on your particular issues. In other words, with conservatives, with Republicans. And then lastly, I would like to respond to any questions, comments, concerns you might have about this process. So before we really dive in, it is good for you to understand and know the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c4. You may have heard of those letters and numbers before, but I have on the screen the definition of what those are. So a 501c3, or we normally just call them a C3, is a nonprofit for religious, charitable, or educational purpose. More than likely, unless you are just simply representing yourself as a concerned individual, you may be doing this type of work with an organization. It is good for you to understand, particularly as a religious leader, which organization are you working with? One that's more religious, charitable, or educational, or a 501c4, which is, as they call it, a social welfare group. Those groups, the C4 groups, they can engage into advocacy and lobbying. Generally, you as a religious leader, because of your status as being a 501c3 institution, if you are a leader of an organization, you want to stay with the 501c3. So there are key things that is good to understand between these two. When it comes to C3 work, you as a concerned individual or a religious leader can simply go in and educate your constituents, your elected officials on those issues that matter the most to you, as opposed to going in and trying to lobby and we've heard some of the horror stories that comes from people with dark money coming in to influence elected officials. That is not what you're doing, and that's not going to jeopardize your status as well. So what you're going to be hearing in this webinar, this presentation, is simply how to educate. It's really about preaching or educating or teaching folks. And again, you as a religious leader should be very familiar with how to do that. So Why would an elected official care about your issue or about those issues that matter the most to you? So I want to talk about some of these rationales. So I'm going to, first of all, specifically talk about advocating for the LGBTQ community. I also have another hat that I didn't mention. I am the board president for a group called Inclusive Justice, and that's here in the state of Michigan. And we are a coalition of congregations and clergy that stand for the rights of LGBT individuals within our communities, and we will advocate for them at the state and federal level. So, speaking on that train of thought about how to advocate for the LGBTQ community, as you meet with folks, they generally may feel like, oh, that's a lifestyle. We don't want to talk about a lifestyle, or I don't agree with that, or my religious conviction tells me something different. When you go in to advocate for LGBTQ issues, you can stop that argument right in its track to say, we're not here to talk about personal lifestyles. What we're here to talk about are life and death issues. That there are laws on the books, particularly here in Michigan, we don't have a statewide protection for LGBT individuals. What does that mean? That means you can be fired from your job for coming out of the closet, or you can be denied in terms of being able to adopt. And in some cases, you can even lose your housing, depending on if someone claims it's their religious prerogative to have that go above your own basic humanity. So, because of that, here you can see these are life and death issues, and that is what you want to communicate with those who you're meeting with. That as you are bringing up these various issues, you are talking about legislation that impacts the daily living and the quality of life for members in their own district, in their own state. And this is why it is so vitally important, life and death issues. The rest of that of the slide you can read for yourself. But basically, it is saying that we now have what we've always known, that we have statistics that say rejection from faith communities as well as families have a adverse impact on the development, particularly for those LGBTQ youth, and we know that can have an impact on adults as well. So again, what we're talking about is making sure that people aren't rejected by the laws of their community and the state in which they live in. Now, when it comes to rationales for advocating for progressive issues as a whole in general, and you can see some of them listed here on the screen at the bottom. And this chart you can see was came up about a year ago in February. But the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because as you are meeting with your legislators, more and more Americans across the board are speaking up in favor of more progressive issues. And so, even if you are choosing to meet with a conservative, excuse me, or a Republican who does not agree with you on these particular issues, you have statistics to show that this is not just about me, but this is about what many people within our community are looking for and are anticipating. And so, whatever your particular issue is beyond LGBTQ rights, then you can also do your research before you go in to meet with your representative. I would like to read this slide in its entirety because we live in such a polarizing society now, nation, and we all know that. And it's always us against them, the good versus the bad, the right versus the left. Christian writer Dorothy Sayers wrote, "The sin of our time is not power hungry materialism, according to liberals, and is not a spirit of permissive lawlessness, according to the conservatives, but rather it is the sin that believes in nothing. The sin that believes in nothing, cares for nothing, seeks to know nothing, interferes with nothing, and therefore enjoys nothing, hates nothing, finds purpose in nothing, and lives for nothing. In other words, you meet with your representatives because you do care for those people in your community and the conditions in which they live in. You are an advocate to champion on their behalf. Now, I recognize that maybe some of you on this call may, quake at the word sin. But the reason why I wanted to share this particular quote is to talk about these divides that we have between the right and the left, the quote unquote good, quote unquote bad, depending on your vantage point. Oftentimes, that should not deter us from still caring and being an advocate and standing up for the rights of those who need us to care for them. That you are not one of these cynical people that just doesn't care for anything. But again, we can just put ourselves on autopilot when it comes to the issues of our day. And I encourage you not to do that, but to, again, find your own authority, own your own authority when it comes to issues that really matter the most to you. So I would say, based upon who you are, that one of the things that I discovered when I went to started to have meetings with legislators, both Democratic and Republicans, that when I signed my email, Reverend Roland Stringfellow, that indeed opened the doors to me in ways that I think that if they knew that I was an LGBT rights advocate, which I am, that they would have been a little bit slower to respond to me. And so I know that I was able to get many meetings, especially with some conservatives, because of that religious title that I have. And that was something that helped open the doors. And once I was before them, I was surprised that simply realizing that this is a human being like I'm a human being, I was able to speak to them in a very calm, passionate way, and was able to actually have some sway. And I'm going to share some of that with you now. So, as I mentioned, I have 12 steps. And so the first step is to find the district and find your district and who represents you. And this is all under the heading of scripting. And so, how do you do that? I would just simply say the same way I did, where's Google? Google is a wonderful thing at times. And so, Google your district map for your state. Every state has two senators, and then beyond that, pay attention to whether you're looking up for your federal representative or your state representative, based upon the issue in which you want to impact. Here in the state of Michigan, we are hoping to have a ballot measure uh, that is being advocated by a group called Fair and Equal Michigan to help change the laws here in this state to expand our state civil rights laws to include LGBT individuals. And so if I was going to focus on that, then clearly I would be reaching out to my state representatives. However, and many of us have been paying attention in the news recently, that we have the Equality Act that has passed the House of Representatives. So let's say you wanted to meet with a House representative, then that's going to be your federal representative. Well, who are they? How do I find them? How do I begin to schedule a meeting with them? I would invite you to go to usa.gov/elective-officials to do that, and we're going to look at that in a moment, for a listing of all the federal, state, and local reps. And so let me stop my PowerPoint and let me take you there now. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. This is at the usa.gov site, and I'm going to obviously the president, if you want to find your senators. Here in Michigan, fortunately, we have two Democratic senators, very progressive on various issues. So we have met with them, but don't have to keep up with them as we would representatives. The third bullet point that you see here is find your U.S. representative. So here's a directory of the various representatives. And so let me click M for Michigan. And here, let me jump down to Michigan. Here we go with Michigan. And they're listed according to their district. And so one person who I am very much looking forward to, haven't met him yet. I've talked with his staffers, but I have not met with him, is newly elected representative for the third district, which is Grand Rapids here in Michigan, is Peter Meyer. So I'm going to click his name, and this now takes me to Peter Meyer's page. So you can find out more about him by simply looking looking at the various things that are here, but we want contact. So there's a drop-down menu, and then I'm going to click Request an Appearance. And then once I go there, I will go ahead and where it says Type of Request, I want to have a meeting request, so I will click that. The location of the event, many of us are not traveling due to COVID, and so it would be in the district. So next time he is at home and not in DC, I would like to do that. Then I will go ahead and put in the day, the month, and the year, how many people will be attending with me, and so forth. Now, I want to point out to you that not all representatives' pages look similar to this. Many of them are different. Let me click the one above Peter Meyer, Bill Huizinga, who is in the Holland area that's also on the west side of the state. And so this is his page, and you can see it's quite different from Peter Meyer's page. But then I will look to where request a meeting, which is over here. Click there. And then the various forms. And again, I would fill that out and you see that's quite different. I wanted to point this out to say that depending on your representative, you'll have to sometimes search for how to request a meeting. And as I mentioned, the various ones look different. Also, if you have any questions or comments as I continue this, go ahead and put it into the chat. I'm going to continue to go, but then I will go back and answer those various questions as you have them. So, like I said, going to that usa.gov, that will then help you to find your representative. And so, again, you can do this, their website like I just showed you, or this, and this is the second bullet point at the bottom of the screen. You can find the email for their staff and request from there. This is also something I have done because sometimes I may collect a business card and I have the email address for the individual directly. Feel free to go ahead and email them directly, and then you have a name to put with it rather than a general purpose form that we just saw for those two representatives. The third step is on the form, you want to include the following, and this will get you noticed. Your name with your title. But I don't have a title. And I would say everybody has a title, whether it is more formal or whether it's informal. You can see what I have down here, that I'm a concerned parent, I'm a concerned teacher, I'm an essential worker. And so you can lead with that because that's going to then let those who are receiving your correspondence know who you are and why you are writing to them and requesting the meeting. The next point under the third is make sure that you have a hook. And this is very, very important. When we went to Peter Meyer's webpage or Bill Huizinga's webpage, when it said on bills, it said meet Bill. And you can click there, I did already. And it tells you a little bit about Bill, about his interests, whether he is a person of faith. So you want to find out those various components about the representative, because that is what you want to include. That's your hook. For example, you might say, hey, as a United Methodist, My faith is important to me, and I know it is for you as a Catholic. And this is assuming that maybe the person you're writing to is a Catholic and you are United Methodist. So you're connecting on the fact that you both are people of faith or religious people. Or it might be some other social activity. You want to try to find something to try to get that hook. So the next thing is to focus on your purpose for wanting to have the meeting. Succinctly, very briefly state that you know, why you want to have this meeting with them. This is something that this is a pitfall that I almost fell into, but I didn't, is this whole concept of bait and switch, especially when I wanted to meet with someone who was conservative or Republican. Meaning it's like, well, maybe they won't care about this issue about LGBT rights or, you know, whatever the other progressive issue is. And, you know, and so I just maybe want to say I'm a faith leader who simply wants to meet. Don't do that. Be very upfront on why you want to meet. Let them know that, you know, who you are, that you want to talk about your particular progressive issue, and that you are a constituent with them. Being very clear on the why and why this issue matters to you. Going into that, and this is all in the little either the introduction email or in the form, is to share your urgency of why you want to meet. And we've all heard this phrase before: I pay my taxes, and you, as a representative, work for me. This is true. And this is also means that it is their job to meet with you. And so you have the right to meet with your representative, even if they are of a different political party. And that is also part of owning your own authority, is to say that, hey, I want to meet with you about this. This matters to me. Now, when you push send, or push submit when it comes to your correspondence, understand you very well may have to do it again and again and again until you get the response that you wanted, some type of response back to say yes, acknowledgement, and to say we received, and maybe this is not a good time, but we want to stay in contact with you. Great, you say, and you continue to stay in contact with them. And so I can't emphasize that enough. So don't take a no answer as a no for an answer. Continue to reach out to them. The fourth is when you are successful. I says once you are successful. When you are successful, because I'm going to trust that you're going to be. When you get your correspondence back, understand that it's not the senator, it's not the representative that you are hearing from themselves. It is their staffer. Their staffer is what I like to call the gatekeeper. And they are the one who's going to sift through the requests that you are coming up with, and to really see how this really fits into the overall agenda. So now we switch from scripting to scheduling. And so, again, they are the ones who you really need to go through. So, again, don't be discouraged if you're like, hey, I was expecting to hear back from my senator. You're not going to. You're going to hear back from the staffer, and they're the ones who you set up your time with. And again, it is with them when they reach back to you. Now you can take a little bit more time to expand upon the reason why you want to meet, expand upon the urgency. This would be a good time to even put in a short, not too much longer, but even a short story. Like, I'm here representing one of my parishioners who is facing, you know, this really devastating issue. And I want to meet with representative or senator such and such to so they can hear, you know, firsthand how this particular law or this bill or how this condition in our state and our community is impacting them. That is when you really share a little bit more. Then that staffer would take that to the representative or the senator. So the fifth step is to prepare to be flexible with your time. Once they then take it back and they check it with the person who keeps their calendar, then they will come back to you and say, okay, can you meet on such and such a date and time? If the stars are aligned, then yes, maybe you can meet with them during that day, and great, you move forward. But oftentimes you might have to juggle around and to try to say like, oh goodness, that date and time does not work. Is there something else? And so hopefully you can keep going back and forth around timing and scheduling until you find a date and a time that works the best. When you're at that stage, it has been very important to ask how much time you are allotted, because oftentimes you can have as little as 15 minutes with a representative or as long as an hour. And it's good for you to know so you can then plan. If indeed no time can be found, they have only one opportunity and you can't make it, then it's quite all right to say, well, on this visit to the district, I won't be able to meet with the representative. But please keep me in mind, and I will continue to reach back to you for a time that will work. Once you have a date and time on the calendar, I did this workshop about a month or so ago, and someone asked the question, well, can I have these meetings by myself? Absolutely, you can. But it is even better and stronger when you can have colleagues join you. The picture that you see here, this is from 2 years ago when we met with former Representative Justin Amash in the Grand Rapids area. And so, what I did at that point in time, I first got the date and time. And then I went and I contacted colleagues to see, and all of them, I was the only one who wasn't from Grand Rapids. I live in the Detroit area. But everyone that you see here in the photo, they live in the Grand Rapids area and they are constituents for that representative. I then let them know, hey, can you meet at this date and time? This is a personal preference of mine. I like to go ahead, as if I'm leading this venture, to go ahead and set up the date and time first, and then find my colleagues, find my partners, find my other champions. Because I just found that rather than trying to get them, say, hey, are you available? When is the meeting? Well, I don't know yet. I haven't scheduled it. Well, call me back when you schedule it. So it's good to get that out of the way. Then you can say, hey, can you meet in such and such a time? I've been in meetings when it has been just myself or with two, or in this case, you see there were six of us all together. And so that is, again, a really good thing to do. Next, based upon the allotted time and that you have, it is good to then meet with your team, whether it's one person or five others, such as the case in Grand Rapids, before you meet with your representative. And so I recall we met at a coffee shop an hour before we were scheduled to meet. And it was at that time that I heard each person why this particular issue and why did we meet with him. We were advocating for at that time it wasn't the Equality Act, but it was around LGBT inclusion in general. And so we were meeting with our with him as a U.S. representative. And so I wanted to hear from everyone in their own words, why does this issue matter to you? And listening to their issues and listening to their stories. And what I ended up doing was helping them to say, that's a wonderful story that you're telling. I don't want you to go in and just simply share facts, because facts, people's eyes is simply glaze over. But a story is compelling. A story will really capture someone's attention and really brings them into exactly to what you're talking about. And so what I then did is I listened to all of my champions first, all of my colleagues, and then I put them in order. I put them in the first, second, and third, fifth order. So with each of their stories, we told an overarching story, an overarching narrative. In other words, let's say it was 4 people. So those 4 people, each of them had their own story to tell. Together, they made up one great overarching narrative. And I went ahead and put them in the order that I felt told the best and most complete story. When we met with Justin Amash, I have to share this with you. Again, Republican at that time. He was not in favor of really voting for LGBT rights. But as each of those people began to tell their individual story and the overarching story, one of the things, and I can't take credit for this, but each of them kept saying, but it is good for you to vote your conscience. It is good for you to vote your conscience. It is good for you to vote your conscience. And we knew that Justin Amash is a man of faith. And so as we shared our story, we connected on that level about more just being a public servant, being a community caregiver to other people. Why did you run for office in the first place? It was so you could do the most good for the most amount of people. So those was a lot of those issues that we kept and lines that we kept sharing with him. So we left. He was like, well, okay, I'll think about it. And we were like, well, you know, we gave it our shot. And then he announced that he was leaving the Republican Party and becoming an independent. And the reporter asked him on NPR, well, why are you doing this? And he repeated, I have to vote my conscience. We're like, that's what we said. That's what we said. Now, did he truly do that based upon what we said? We'd like to take credit for it, but we really don't know. The point I am making is that I believe because we told a great overarching narrative, that was part of the story that really did speak to him. And later, he ended up tweeting his support for the transgender community. So we consider that a huge win. Next and this is now we're moving into the speaking or preparing. Once you've got your people together, and you still might feel like, okay, well, great, I got my meeting, I got the date. Now what do I say? How do I even begin to put together something that will really work? I would then say, we're going to get to that in a moment. But when it comes to your meetings, always arrive early, even if it's on a Zoom call. And that's going to demonstrate how you are very appreciative of that person's time. And then again, go with that overarching story that I talked about, because that story shares why you care, and why they should care as well. So be prepared to respond to some of their questions, anticipating opposition, especially if you're meeting with conservatives or Republicans. Making sure that your response should be fair-minded and logical. And you see I have those 2 words highlighted. Well, what does that mean? Fair-minded and logical. Because oftentimes when you are advocating for a progressive point of view, one of the things, you're not going to get into an argument with the person, but you are there to be persuasive. And oftentimes when you are meeting with conservatives, that as you with your concern, you're basically going to be sharing something that is simply fair-minded. That the reason why I'm here advocating for this issue for transgender individuals not to be isolated when it comes to restrooms is to talk about the difficulty that puts the individual under. Regardless if this person agrees with you or not, you are still making a fair-minded or logical rationale for why you are advocating for your particular issue. Your goal at the end of the day is to sway the opinion of the person you're speaking with towards your point of view, whether it is or simply publicly expressing their opinion whether such as in an op-ed or that is what they will write for a newspaper, or making a statement like a simple statement that can be shared on social media or other media outlets. I'm going to say that point again. Your goal is to sway their opinion towards your issue by voting in favor of your issue or simply making some type of public statement. Now, you might ask, well, in particular, this photo that you see here is with one individual meeting with a Democratic representative. Well, if I'm progressive, why do I need to meet with another progressive uh, legislator? Aren't they already on our side on these issues? They very well may be. However, even though they might vote, oftentimes when I or our team meet with Democrats, we then try to encourage them to make a public statement. When we met with Senator Debbie Stabenow a year ago, and of course, she is a fierce advocate, Democratic advocate here in the state of Michigan. One of the things that we asked her for is to make a video talking about her support for the LGBTQ community and her wanting to making sure that all Michiganders are treated fairly. She agreed to do that, and then we were able to upload that video to YouTube and also to our other partners' websites. And again, Debbie Stabenow, is a great supporter, but until we were able to get her to say it, some people, she was able to reach some people who wouldn't have known otherwise that she was this advocate for the LGBT community until she did that. So that is one of the ways and one of the great ways you can work with also progressive or Democratic legislators. Now, I kind of got ahead of myself a while ago. Now you have got your time set up and you are going to be meeting. Now you got your team together. Now, what do we say? How do we put our words together? So, a dear colleague of mine, Rebecca Orr, who is a person who works with canvassing and putting talking points, various talking points together. She worked with us here in Michigan to help come up with the right amount of framing and talking points to help be persuasive. Like I said, part of that goal is to be persuasive in your issues, and so these can help. First is to situate your voice in your personal religious identity. So you're not just some generic religious person. And even if you are not a clergy, meaning with a collar and a stole, that's still quite all right. If you are a person of faith, if you're a religious person, if you're part of a religious community, then that is your personal religious identity. And so that is what you want to first begin with. So, as a Jewish person, as a Muslim, next bullet point, advocates should talk about the role faith has played in their lives and what religious identity means to them personally. And you might say, well, what if this person I'm talking to isn't a person of faith? Won't their eyes glaze over if I'm just going in talking about uh, religious things or my own particular story? And I would say that is your hook. The fact that you are a person of faith, that you are a religious person, that gives you the street cred to come in and to speak to them on these particular issues. So don't minimize your religious identity, maximize it with them because it is awfully hard to critique someone's personal journey or for their own personal relationship with the divine, however they define the divine. Third, before you tell people what you believe, share how you as a religious person came to believe as you do. Otherwise, it just really kind of gets people into this head space rather than the heart space. Speaking from your own religious perspective, that goes straight to the heart. And again, you as a religious leader or a representative of a religious community, one of the main reasons why they would want to meet with you, they will be a fool not to, is because they recognize you represent a segment of a community, a population, a congregation of people. And the fact that you are there, and if you can engage, if they can engage with you, they also might have sway with your particular community or congregation. So that is something to keep in mind, and that is why it is good to maximize your religious identity. And again, you don't want to just simply go in a sense, it's not a preaching another sermon per se, but going back to not just sharing facts, but sharing stories. And that is how you move from the head space to the heart space. If we wish to be persuasive and mobilize our audience, we must tell journey stories and that are authentically connected to our experience, our identity, and our values as a religious person. Now, let's say that you've gotten there. It's like, I don't know what story that's going to be persuasive or that's going to be authentic. Well, even if you don't have one, you can bring in someone else's story. For example, when we met with Dan Kilday, you saw one of the slides a while ago. The two preachers who were there personally, and I was at home on Zoom. What we ended up doing, what they ended up doing was also sharing stories of people in their community. In other words, it wasn't their personal story, but because they were clergy, they had the authority to share the story of someone else. So you can do that as well, even if you are a parent or a teacher or an essential worker. You can share someone else's story, even if it's not yours. So here are some examples of what I mean by these effective these effective journey stories, or here we're calling them journey hooks. Like many other Catholics, I once judged people who were transgendered, but now, let me pause there. So you can first begins with the religious identity, talked about where you were, and now where you are. I used to judge people who are transgendered, but now, then you would finish out your statement. That really helps your audience or the person you're speaking with to understand that I went through a journey myself, or I'm going to share you about someone else's journey because ultimately you want them to make a journey as well. Growing up Jewish, being gay wasn't something discussed much in our home or community, but and when it was talked about, it usually wasn't good. So at first, I didn't know what to think about non discrimination laws. But now I've come to understand, and then you would finish that out. So again, I didn't know what to think. That's where you were. But now where you are, and you again sharing that journey. Like many Muslims, I didn't grow up knowing many openly gay people. So when my sister came out lesbian, it was difficult at first, but now this last point, this last bullet point, I think is one of the most effective ones because many people know some LGBT person in their lives, even if they are closeted or closeted. And so this is one of the hooks that I have personally found that when I've talked about someone in my family or myself, it tends to open up the door that if they have someone in their family who identifies as LGBT or Q, that they can then share. And now they have a dialogue about that as well. Even if they're not supportive, that still you are giving them an opportunity to share. So making this proactive case for pro LGBTQ policies coming up soon is you might say, well, what opportunity will I have to meet with my representative and what in the world would I talk to them about? Well, we have the Equality Act happening in the Senate. So if you live in a state where there's a senator who is not supportive of the bill, then maybe meeting with them. But another case that is coming up that is at the Supreme Court that will be decided upon probably sometime in June or a little bit beforehand, is this case called Fulton versus the City of Philadelphia. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, this is a, a Catholic charities group, Catholic social services group, Fulton, that has denied same-sex couples from adopting. And so the city of Philadelphia is suing this agency for the right for them to open up their agency to allow all couples, no matter how they identify, to bring in children. So regardless of what state you live in, you don't need to live in Pennsylvania. This is a case that you can advocate, particularly with various legislators, so they can also be supportive of this issue. So, for example, on this Fulton v. Philadelphia decision, some advocates may say if the court finds in favor of Catholic social services, this is something you don't want to do. Why? Because when the argument starts with this type of framing, speaking of in favor of, this framing, the pro-equality position is already framed in an opposition. In other words, you are setting it up to say that I'm, I'm in opposition to what the Catholic social services is about. And you might say, but I am not in favor of that. I want to see adoptions to happen. That very well may be, but when you are talking to people, one of the things that particularly us as religious leaders need to make sure we don't fall into is the case where we are setting up the us versus them dichotomy happening. And so you want to be careful with how you are setting up that it's not about us versus them and so forth. That especially when you are meeting with representatives who may not agree with your issues, you're going in to talk about we are all in this together. We all live in the same community. We all live in the same state. We all live in the same nation. And all people need to be treated with fairness and with dignity and respect. So stay away from those various dichotomies. Second bullet point, focusing on opponents or characterizing their motives rather than emphasizing the harm caused places LGBTQ advocates in opposition to faith in ways that are not helpful and interfere with persuasion. We all have heard about this God versus gays dichotomy, that clearly if you are a religious person, you are not in favor of anything dealing with LGBT issues. And so you as a progressive person, whether you identify as LGBTQ or not, you can then still go in. It's like, I'm not here to get into, the right and wrongness per se. But what I am here to talk about is how these laws of our state or of our community are harming those people that I care about, that you should care about because they are your constituents as well. So let's talk about the flip side of that coin. So how then should I talk about it? Well, one of the reasons why I'm proud to be a Catholic, in this case, a Catholic individual, is because of our deep tradition. Notice that I emphasize that. Talking about that also helps with your street cred. Of our deep tradition of caring for some of the most vulnerable in our society. I underscored vulnerable because, again, it's part of that storytelling, gets to the heart, and lets people know that if they vote against LGBT people, well, they can just go find another job. They can go find another home. They can go live somewhere else. That no, we're talking about the vulnerability of people in your community, and you need to protect them. So I believe that we are called to do I believe we are called to do so even when it feels morally complicated, and even when those in need may feel different. As a Catholic, I cannot support any court decision or law that would allow organizations serving the public, that should be underscored, to deny food to the hungry and shelter to the homeless or medical care to the ailing simply because they do not share my faith or conform to my beliefs. Here's an excellent way of framing your pro-LGBTQ equality policy that really gets at the heart. It talks about your street cred and has it very, very succinct. Going back to our list of 12, we're at number 10 now. So the fact that you were able to meet with your rep, consider that a win. What do I mean with that? The fact that you were able to get in front of someone either physically or virtually, whether they are Democrat or Republican, the fact that you got that meeting, that's a great win for you. Now, if your rep engages you in a question, rather than just simply listen and nod their head, and look at their watch, that's even a bigger win. That means that your hooks and you were persuasive with them in ways that really did engage them to get them to start asking questions. Even if they ask you a question you don't know the answer to, that's quite all right. That means, again, their mind is churning. If the rep keeps you longer than the allotted time because he or she is interested in discussing your issue, it's a home run, and that's a good thing to have. And then lastly, if you can get your rep to agree to vote in your favor or make a public statement, then I consider that a grand slam. And so again, those are the various steps that you want to try to get to. Can I get the meeting? Can I get them interested in my issue, that they're engaging me with questions? Are they so interested that we've gone beyond the hour? And then again, where they can say, yes, I agree with you. I am willing to do this particular action. That is the grand slam. Number 11, when the meeting is ended, be sure to thank everybody in the room. And I'm sure you would do that as well. But your thank yous don't stop there. Your thank yous continue when you get back to your home. Be sure to write a note, whether it's an email or even something that is handwritten. Let me just say something about handwritten notes. Sometimes those can be delayed, and we know what the mail system is like now. But sometimes a thank you note that is written, although it is nice, sometimes may not get to the right office at the time you need it to get there because they have to do some screening sometimes of the mail. So if you have the business card of the person you met with, be sure to email them that thank you and do it on behalf of everyone on your team. It is not necessary that everybody on your team sends a thank you note. One is sufficient for the entire group. Unless I say that person is a standout star, that's in the second paragraph. And maybe one person had a really wonderful story, then yes, it's appropriate for that one person to then write a thank you as well. Number 12. As you follow up, you've had your meeting, it's been successful, you've sent your thank you notes. You want to keep the conversation going with that representative. Keep the door open, if you will. So as various news stories pop up that support your position that you've talked about, then go ahead and forward those news stories or forward those links to your rep versus via the staffers, to let them know, hey, this is something that we talked about. Or, hey, the next time we meet, I would like to talk about this. So it really does keep the door open. So it's not so much necessarily a one and done, but you want to try to keep the door and the door open and the relationship going. So thank you for this. And here is my contact information, especially if you're watching this not live, but on recorded, and you have a question or a concern or some type of other question about the how-to, you can go ahead and email me at rstringfellow@clgs.org, and I will be very happy to get back with you. So I would now like to just open it up and see if there are any questions or comments or concerns that you have that you would like to share. Randy?
I always have something to say, as you know.
Yeah.
But or I always have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If we've got two senators who are voting the way we want them to vote, But we know that the Equality Act, for example, could be taken down by senators from other states. Uh, what is the strategy for having that larger network to engage uh, those senators? Because sending an email to a senator that's not from your state doesn't work out too well sometimes. I've tried it, or even making a phone call to some senator. I don't say what state I'm from, hoping they won't find out, just so I can get a message through. But is it worth some effort to call some legislators, a member of Congress, when you're not from their state? And I sometimes I've done that with Mitch McConnell, for example. He's a real toughie.
Indeed. That's an excellent question. And you know what, Randy? This is not a cop out answer. I would say it all depends. Meaning, especially during the 2020 election, you had people from various states getting involved in Georgia, getting involved in Michigan. For example, when it came to a lot of our issues as well. And I would say that if indeed there is a groundswell within that particular state about impacting their legislators, I would say go ahead and join them. Many states, if not all states, I think many states have equality organizations that advocate for the LGBTQ community. I would go ahead and, like, for example, Equality in North Carolina. Go ahead and look up and see what they are up to, what are their efforts, and how you can then join. How to I see that. Thank you, Reg. How you can join the effort that is happening in their state as well. Sometimes it might be making a donation, or even phone banking or something if this state does not have a lot of volunteers for phone banking. I know for myself, because I am a statewide leader with Inclusive Justice. Randy is also on the board with me at Inclusive Justice. That I could reach out to people whose communities I'm not a part of. That is the reason why I was working, in the North and in the East and in the West, and communities that I don't particularly live in, is because I'm representing this coalition. So in my case, it's like, well, why is this person who's not from Grand Rapids, why is he requesting a meeting with me? Is because, again, I represent this particular coalition, and then I go and find the various voices that are there as well. So again, it really does depend upon what's already happening, I would say, on the ground, with the groundswell. Reg put into the chat that there is an organization called NEAT, capital NEAT, that you can go and there, and they also will help you connect with people in other states around these various issues. So thank you, Reg, for that as well. One of the other questions that popped up that I saw in the chat is, will these slides be made available? What we're going to be doing is this is being recorded, and this will be uploaded to YouTube. And so the various slides and the conversations and so forth, that is how you'll be able to access it. I've been asked by a variety of people, will this session be recorded? And yes, and we just found that YouTube is one of the most accessible ways to get the word out, as opposed to, here's a link to a Google Drive someplace. And so before the end of this week, this will be uploaded to YouTube, and it will be on the Inclusive Justice site, as well as the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies, and other partners as well, if they choose to. All right, let's see. Any other questions?
I don't want to be the guy that talks too
Go
much.
right ahead.
But have you trying to do a little bombarding of legislators on their Facebook pages? Because they usually look to have positive PR coming out, like legislator Joe Blow is really a great guy, come to visit his fundraiser. But if you had people, 20 different people also kind of contacting about saying, well, we think that Joe Blow ought to be taking a stronger stance on something or other. Do you have any thoughts about using Facebook as a tool?
And clearly I paid Randy to say that because that is perfect. I'm glad I'm glad you brought that
Okay,
up.
well, I'm waiting for my pay too,
That's
Roland.
right. I should have said that because Randy's the type of person he's going to be expecting that check to arrive in the mail. Randy, that's wonderful. Thank you. Because if you have a particular legislator who you are, have your eye on, or someone that you really want to then influence, then following them on Facebook or any other social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter and so forth, is the way to go, because oftentimes Bill Heisinger, who I had on, who I showed a few moments ago at the top of the hour, he is somebody who only lets his constituents know that he's having a town hall through Facebook or through social media. And so you just simply have to know that. And so that is one of the ways that you can then keep in contact on what's happening. I will say this much. I mentioned Peter Meyer from the Grand Rapids area. I follow him on Facebook, and I know that he is somebody who I'm hoping we as progressive may have some type of sway with him, because he was one of the few Republicans who voted to impeach the former president, and then has made some other um, legislative things that necessarily progressives don't agree with. But um, I was able to hear about his town hall through his Facebook. I was able to interact with what he wrote on Facebook about that, to give some encouragement to that. And actually, I'm on Facebook, not Facebook friends, but I follow quite a few legislators on Facebook. And whenever I see them posting something that is really good and more inclusive, even though they are Republicans, I then respond to that, to let them know, or put the little like or the love symbol to encourage them to say, hey, yes, as a constituent in this state, that's the way to go. And so that's a wonderful thing to do, especially if you are not quite ready to stick your toe into the water of scheduling a meeting with somebody. Here is a really good way, low pressure way to influence your representatives. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your attention. Again, if you have any questions or any additional follow up, please feel free to contact me at rstringfellow@clgs.org, and that is for the Center for Lesbian, Gay, and Gender Studies at the Pacific School of Religion. So, thank you again for taking time out of your day to be with us today. Be blessed.